Hey everybody, Mark Arinsberg here with the Pure Now Show. This is episode number 29. My guest today is Gabriel Rocha. Gabriel is a motion designer with over 15 years experience. He's originally from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, picked up his family and moved to the UK and has been working for Tendril studio there in Canada for almost 9 years. Here we go. Hey Gabriel, good morning. Well, good morning for me, and you're where?
I'm in Toronto, Canada. It's 8 p.m. here.
Okay, so you're looking at 13 hours difference. So you're going into the evening, your day is over. How was your work day?
Today was pretty relaxed. Not very often that happens, but it was pretty relaxed.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you being on the Pure Now show. It's great to have you on, and happy to hear all the things you got going on. We can start with the fact that you're actually from Rio de Janeiro, correct?
Exactly, yeah. I'm from Rio, Brazil. I moved to Canada about 5 years and a half ago, and I moved straight to Tendril.
That must have been extreme culture shock from you going from Brazil to Toronto, Canada. It's kind of like day and night, I would imagine, for you. How'd you make that adjustment?
It's very different, but it wasn't a huge shock for me because I had experience with North America. My sister lives in US, which is not exactly Canada, of course not, but there is a lot of North American culture and a lot of things are similar. I lived a year with her when I was, 19 years old. It was an awesome experience. It made my English bloom, got really better. So when I came here, before I moved here, I came to Canada 3 or 4 times, mostly for work. Only once was just for vacations to get to know the city, because I already had a lot of friends working here. So I came here to get to know the city, to visit these friends, and I loved it. It was an awesome experience. And since then, I kept in touch with several studios from Toronto. I kept working for them as freelancers until I was hired by Tendril and I started working with them. So moving here wasn't a big hassle. It was, the only shock was a family life here is very different, because all the times that I visited Canada before, I came by myself, almost like a single guy life, So when I came here with the family, it's a very different, kind of lifestyle, which is good. I like the lifestyle here. If I didn't, I definitely wouldn't stay here, because if you have to put up with the cold right during the winter.
Right.
So you really want to stay here to stay here.
Right. It's really kind of the opposite of Brazil, and it's interesting. You're from Brazil. My new favorite writer over the past couple of years has been Paulo Coelho. And, he's huge. Yeah, he's huge, and I've been recommending him to everybody I know. Fantastic author. This is a shameless plug for him. I've never plugged an author on the show before, but if you're looking for some really deep, fantastic literature to read, Paulo Coelho is an incredible writer. Well, let's talk about Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and growing up. Obviously, at some point you had an event, or you saw a movie, or something happened that triggered you and got you excited about the potential of getting into the business of visual design. Tell me about that.
For sure. It's a very interesting story, actually. I think it started like most of designers, right? We see posters and we go man, this is amazing. There's something I can do to make that, to work with that for a living. Design in general, vinyl covers, magazines, all this kind of stuff. I was always amazed. Comic books, everything related to graphic design somehow was always amazed me very much. As soon as I learned there was graphic design school, I aimed for that, and I went to graphic design college in Rio. It was very early stage of motion graphics, so nobody knew what was motion graphics back then. That was 2005. That tells how old I am. I started to get interested in motion graphics, but it was very early. It was mostly flash animations, a little bit After Effects was, if you wanted to learn After Effects, was only through books, but After Effects was something that was very far away from me. It was oh no, this is for the pros, I'm never gonna get there. I went to a talk in a web design event, And there was this Brazilian designer, which was already quite famous in the motion graphics community, Nando Costa. After his talk, he talked a lot about motion graphics. He was just, he was already a reference worldwide, but he was in a web design event. So everybody there was still like, what's this guy talking about? There was a lot of developers and programmers and coders there, not much designers per se. It was funny to see like everybody was just in shock, like this is nothing that I've ever seen. And I remember seeing that, and I was like, this is really what I want to do. And I started to, dig into that a little bit more. Started buying After Effects books, and there was no YouTube, anything like that. So it was always like exchanging CDs with friends, with tutorials and workshops and etc. And I think when things started to pick up for me in the industry.
How old were you at the time when this all started to churn for you?
Oh man, okay, so 2001 I was 19, so 2000 it was 2005, 2006-ish, something like this, so I was 24, 25, something like this.
What did you do with that? Now you're super jacked up about motion graphics. How did you start to really add value by getting the tools you needed so you can actually make this your career path?
Well, I had no idea how to do that, right? Like it's just something that was motion graphic was something very far away. So I think I just started to, reach people that I knew that had some kind of proximity with it. I had some friends working in a video production company. They used to do mostly like 3D commercials, but with characters and, stuff for politics, nothing super interesting. So I reached them and they kind of knew how to get into the industry, although they weren't doing like extreme motion graphics. And I think we all started to grow together into that industry, right? Like we all started to connect the dots and talk about like, have you seen this new designer? Have you seen this conference that happens, in Europe? And I think I wanted to, get into the industry. And Rio is not very famous for having a lot of studios for motion graphics. I mean, there's a lot of motion graphics artists there, a lot of very good people. There are some awesome studios, but not many, especially in 2005, 2006. There was just like a handful of it. So I just started applying and then I started to get to know more people. And my break in the industry per se, because it wasn't actually motion graphics, was there was this group of animators they were starting an animation movie, all done in Flash. Nothing like that has ever been done in Brazil, and even in the world. I don't think there was many Flash movies back then. They needed an After Effects compositor, and I had no idea what that meant. But this friend of mine was working there, and he told me, "Look, man, I know it's not exactly what we are looking for, but like we're gonna learn a lot here." So I applied for the job. They asked for a reel. I did not had a reel. I didn't expect they were gonna take me in for an interview. So they told me, okay, can you come back here tomorrow morning? I was like, oh yeah, of course. Do you have a reel? I was like, yeah, I have a reel. So I just went a pull all-nighter just to do some kind of crazy animations, just to get something done and to present them. And then I got the job. And then was like I spent a year and a half there, or 2 years, just like After Effects day and night, a lot of volume of just compositing and learning plugins, learning the tool. So there was not much design applied, but the tool, like I mastered as much as I could back then. Yeah, and after that, a year and a half there, I realized, okay, I love the tool. I would love to keep working with that, but this is not what I want to do. I'm not a compositor. I don't want to work with character animation and this kind of stuff. So I started to look for studios in Rio. I didn't find anything that was very interesting. There wasn't many, as I said previously. So I just started to email studios around the world, and luckily, some studios started to call me back, and then I started my freelancer career. It was very scary because I quit my job to focus on that, but things worked out pretty well.
Well, your work is world class. Your portfolio is incredible. As a matter of fact, is it Hoblot, the watch piece that you did? What is it? The Square Bang. Oh my goodness, man.
Square Bang, yeah.
That is just a sensational piece, and it's right on top, number one. It's really a great way to look at your body of work. I'm just curious, what was the piece that you created that got you in the door that you pulled an all-nighter on?
Oh man, it's that kind of stuff that you can never share again, you know. I'm sure that I don't have it anymore. I have something very close to it somewhere. And but it was just like playing with trap code particular and trying to get a lot of design into it, because I wasn't a great animator back then. So I just started to put everything I could from graphic design and just started animating some cameras, some typography. But it's definitely not the kind of stuff that you have in your portfolio nowadays.
So are your parents creative? Where did some of this come from? Typically, what I find is a lot of guests, their parents were creative, but not anything really remotely close to what it was that they ended up doing. Is your father and mother, are they artists of any kind?
I asked myself a lot that when I was younger. They never pushed me into any kind of creative work, like creative things, like they are not creative. My father has some of it on himself, but he never worked with creativity. He was never like a creator per se. But every time I had some kind of schoolwork, he was, my guide. Like I remember I'll never forget that day that I had to draw some animals, or I don't know, I was 10, something like this. And my father drew this beautiful bird, it was beautiful, beautiful. I was like, Dad, I never knew you know how to draw. I was like, oh, this is nothing. I was like, why he's saying that's nothing? And then talking with him after I got a little older, he told me, because I never met my grandfather on my father's side. My father said, no, your grandfather was like a real artist, an inventor, an entrepreneur. Like he had it all, but he died really young. He was, 60, close to 60. I never get to see his body of work. And my father said that they had this huge collection of paintings and frames, beautiful work, but they lost it on floodings, because my father used to live in a place in Brazil called Espírito Santo. There was a lot of floodings there, and they lost it all in there, so they had to restart their life. But anyways, they always pushed me to do whatever I wanted. They had a business. They used to sell stones and gems, and not like diamonds or anything like that, but more like amethyst, emeralds. And they had also some there was some craft in it. They had some stone birds. They used to sell it, but they weren't the sculptors. They had the formula, so they would hire a big team to work for them, and they would sell it worldwide in Brazil as well. But in the beginning, they started to think that me or my sister, we would have to work with them. And we did when we were quite younger, like almost like a summer job, right? But they never pushed me to do that. They always were very supportive about, do what you want to do. Like, this is what we end up doing. Like, it paid for our living, it paid for your school. I hope you have the same luck as us. If you want to keep working with us or keep the business going, it's up for you guys, for you and your sister, but whatever you want to do, we are fully supportive.
It sounds like your grandfather was a true Renaissance man of his day.
Yeah, he would be I think he was a very rare person back then, and imagine nowadays he would be totally very rare person.
Were you guys able to get any of his stuff, rescue any of his art?
Not actually. My father, I remember some years ago, my father still was like, then it must be somewhere, because he has 3 sisters and 1 brother, and he kept asking himself, it must be somewhere. I can't believe we lost everything. So he kept asking his sisters, his brother, but nobody knew where he was. So either he's in the basement on someone's house, or they really lost it. Mm-hmm. But I remember him saying like several times that they had a lot and then they lost it all, mm-hmm. and then they had a lot and then they lost it all, over and over again. In these floods and these kind of things. So
did you draw as a child? Was any of that part of you growing up, or did you just kind of bypass that whole thing and then at one point just hit the digital world pretty hard?
Oh yeah, I drew a lot when I was a child, a lot, especially like in the influence of video games and cartoons, like comics. I remember having like this big collection of drawings, and there was this point in my life where I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know where I want to go, right before college and etc. Like I had no idea what to do with my life. I didn't discover that graphic design was a thing. You know, I loved it, but I didn't know what was it. I had all these drawings and I thought I threw it away. And one day my mother came to me with like this big bin with like all of my drawings. And it was like such an awesome surprise, you know. I had already moved away from Brazil. I was here already in Canada. So I went back there and I was looking for a no document from me because, you know, when you immigrate, you always need a bunch of documents to, you know, restart your life. So I told her, like, where are all my old documents, those ones that you'll probably never need again. It was like, oh, it's in this bin back there, just check there. And I was checking, I saw all these cartoons and drawings, but it's a shame that I didn't keep drawing on my adult life. I do it once in a while, but it's definitely not something that, you know, I pursued or I had such a passion for it. And I think that the digital world just like sparked me something that I did the transfer of my creativity to the digital world, you know?
When do you think you stopped drawing?
I think it was in the end of my teenage years, around 17, something like this, where I was really like struggling to, I wouldn't say struggling, but you know, you're at that point where you're trying to, you know, learn who you are, what kind of music do you really like, you know, you are trying to fit in and not trying to fit in at the same time because you still like your stuff, you want your stuff. And at this moment I just lost interest in a lot of stuff and got interested in other stuff. It's hard just to be precise, to be honest.
Yeah. Now that you've discovered this thing, you've got a lot of passion for it, you're in Brazil. How do you start to facilitate progressing in your professional career? You find that one particular opportunity. What does that end up leading you to next after that?
When I left the animation studio to start working as a freelancer, I had some 3 studios that I would constantly keep working for them. That they were tiny studios back then. Some of them are huge now, some of them disappeared, and 3 or 4 studios, and some of them are just still around, but they didn't grow a lot or they didn't move any direction. I saw that was interesting, that American and European studios were, taking me in for work. I knew my rate was very, very low because I needed to get in the industry, right? So I couldn't ask for I didn't even know what was the right price. How could I know, right? Like, I didn't have any friends working as a freelancer for abroad. And the economy was pretty bad in Brazil back then. So whatever I made in dollars was still pretty good for a guy just starting his professional life.
Right.
So I think after getting into the industry very kind of in a soft mode, I realized that I had to keep pushing. I had to keep, try to contact the right people, trying to get into the right places. There was these job forums that was mostly for the industry, for video and design industry. Since I didn't know anyone, I just kept pushing further on those forums and kept getting accepted for jobs. And, things just kept moving forward organically. Like, producers, they would move to another studio, and they would, call me back. Like, people would talk in this industry, like how it is supposed to happen, right? If you do your job right, if everything goes smoothly, like, everybody wants a professional that works like that. And I think I hit the right buttons. Everything was moving forward for me in that sense. And I just kept moving forward. And for learning and this kind of other technical skills, I think it's just something in our industry that we know we have to keep pushing forward, learning new softwares. Like C4D wasn't very popular back then. Like, they had just started their MoGraph module, and it was, I think when that happened, everybody was like, this is pretty cool, right? This is pretty cool for motion graphics. I don't remember the year that happened. I didn't want to become like a 3D, a super 3D specialist designer. I loved After Effects. I loved 2D animation. It was interesting, like, the possibilities were wider, right? If you can do something in 3D. So I think I started mixing a little bit with 3D, learning a little bit of C4D here and there. Things also started to keep moving forward in that direction, where I would be called to do some style frames or some just getting some art direction, animating them, or having some possibilities of animation and testing things out, a little bit of R&D. But I never went crazy into the C4D world. I think I always took the C4D as a tool to improve and helping with my design style, like and as I said before, widen the possibilities of motion graphics, right, and style frames. And besides that, I think I just kept going for some conferences in Rio, in Sao Paulo, sometimes abroad, and trying to get more people. And I think in this industry, this kind of stuff, after you take the right steps, get to know the right people, things just move kind of organically really well.